Welcome back to Second Breakfast. Today we're going to talk about The Fall Guy, but we're also going to talk about talking about The Fall Guy because we keep zooming out the last few weeks.
I was going to say, this is like the Taylor Swift episode we did a couple weeks ago.
And that's going to be referenced. So yeah, today we're talking about success and failure because I've had a bee in my bonnet since I've seen this movie, and I can't stop thinking about it. So all right, let's jump in. This is The Fall Guy, which is directed by David Leitch, who you might know from his initial involvement with the stunt coordination and everything for John Wick. He was uncredited as the director, even though he was sort of the co-director of that first one. And since then, he's gone off and made his own movies. We'll talk about those in a bit, but those include Atomic Blonde, Deadpool 2, and most recently, Bullet Train.
I loved Atomic Blonde, by the way.
Me too.
That movie is so good. Mm-hmm. If you want like a good, solid action movie that's like stylized and cool.
If you want more badass Charlize Theron after Fury Road, check out Atomic Blonde.
That's right.
So this one, The Fall Guy, stars Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt. This sort of back-of-the-napkin pitch is that Ryan Gosling is a down-on-his-luck stuntman who has a big accident, which bounces him out of the business. He's roped back in for a big, huge action movie directed by his ex. He's the stunt double for this big movie star who's missing. And the mystery of him chasing down that gets him into all sorts of shenanigans.
Yeah. I was really excited for this movie when we were seeing trailers because I love Emily Blunt. I love Ryan Gosling. Oh, yeah. And I was like, cool, action rom-com. This is going to be great. And I really, really liked it. I had a great time at this movie.
Me too. Me too. So, I was locked in. I laughed. I almost cried in like the first minute when the inciting incident happened.
Oh yeah, it's pretty because you don't see it coming. You're like, oh god.
Well, no, I did see it. I just like Ryan Gosling.
Sure, yeah.
It's his fault.
And so what's interesting here is that what you're going to get into, it seems like, is this movie is being called a failure. Yep. But like this movie was great, so I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, so here's the issue. The budget for the movie is 130 to 150 million. Not confirmed exactly.
Can you explain that to people who don't know movie budgets very well? Like compare
Oppenheimer
that to
was
something
100.
Else. Yeah, Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer was pretty thrifty. I think Dune was in the range of 160.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's an expensive movie.
Yeah, I mean, like some of the Marvel movies, a lot of Disney movies tip over. When Indiana Jones, this most recent one, it had like, what was it, like 300 million?
It was
something
way too
insane.
much. Yeah.
Like that, 300's way too high.
Right. So this like being, sorry, you said like 130, 150?
130 to 150.
Yeah, it's on the higher end, but it's not crazy. But it's like too high for what this movie really should be.
Yeah, and I don't even know. I mean, I guess, yeah, it is. I would have preferred if it was less because then it would make more money. And as of the last time I checked the numbers, which was this past Friday from when this episode's being released, it had made 71 million worldwide, about half of that from the US. So not a fantastic opening, and immediately the movie was labeled a flop before most people had seen it. You know, that's based on the reviews from people who went to early screenings, and then the think pieces, and you know how these things snowball.
Yeah.
So we had 2 weeks of, this is the death of cinema and that whole discourse. And I think financially, sure, you can call it a failure. I don't think we're going to get the sequel that they've talked about in interviews, but I also don't think that's the end of the conversation because this is where we come in. And I mean specifically Maggie and I, because this episode I want to be sort of a continuation of the more conceptual chats we've had lately. We did that episode about bad art from a few months ago, which started with me vociferously defending the 50 Shades of Grey books. And then a couple weeks ago, we talked about the new Taylor Swift album, The Tortured Poets Department. And that turned into a conversation about artist intent. And ambiguity and humility. From the perspective of the audience.
Right, and how you, like, what stance you take when you're interpreting, or not even interpreting, just like enjoying or getting something out of a work of art.
Right, and the whole conversation about The Fall Guy has turned into something that I think slots right next to those sort of episodes. It's how we talk about success and failure, particularly for movies, because if we have a monoculture anymore, that's pretty much where it is.
Yeah.
Not even that often. Something like Dune, for a week, that'll be the monoculture.
Right.
Marvel, 5 or 6 years ago, maybe it was there. But when we all connect, it's usually about a movie.
Yeah, you're right.
Sometimes it's about a show, but even that, it's so fractured now with streaming services. It used to happen, back in like the Tiger King days of Netflix.
Sure.
Stranger Things. You really got to hit the ceiling to even have a monoculture moment. The zeitgeist, when it comes together, is incredibly fleeting nowadays.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think there are two valid, for me, ways that we can talk about the failure of a movie. The first one is the financial failure of the movie going to affect the careers of those involved? And really what I'm asking there is, will David Leitch, Ryan Gosling, Emily Blunt, will they get to make more movies? And yes, they absolutely will.
Certainly, yes. For sure.
Because, especially for Leitch, most of his movies have done really well. He seems like he gets everything done on time and on budget. There aren't like scandals behind the scenes of him being all, I only want the red M&Ms, and if I see an orange, I'm going to burn down the set. Like, there's none of that stuff.
Right.
And Ryan Gosling has sort of an up and down career. A lot of his more interesting risk movies don't do incredibly well.
Right.
Even things like Blade Runner.
Sure.
Or The Nice Guys.
But in recent years, he's been really growing in popularity.
Yeah, he did Barbie last year.
Right, Oscar nominated. Like, Ryan Gosling is bigger than he's ever been right now.
So all three of those I know there are obviously other players, writers, stunt people, we can't talk about everyone in one episode.
No,
but those are the three players. They're all going to be fine.
Yeah.
The second thing, if you're talking about the failure of a movie, is the movie good? And I think that question instantly branches into 1,000 different conversations.
Of course, yeah.
We can't have all of those. But for me, yeah.
Yeah.
This movie was definitely good. And I was reminded of Blockbuster. I don't know if you had much Blockbuster experience in your childhood.
Oh, I 100% did. It was a weekly, if not bi-weekly event going to Blockbuster.
So maybe you can remind our younger listeners and viewers, when you walked through the hallowed aisles of Blockbuster, could you tell the opening weekend gross of every movie on the shelf?
Certainly not. I mean, they would always like really advertise like whatever new movie they just got on DVD or VHS, and they would like put it up on a big poster on the window.
But you don't know the numbers.
Yeah, right. No, it was just like, oh, that movie looks like fun.
Right.
Or I've heard of that movie. Or I keep seeing this, but I haven't watched it yet. I'd like to rent that. Yeah.
And this movie works perfectly well as a standalone. I don't think it needs to be a franchise. And it's now going to bounce around streaming platforms for the next 10 years. And people are going to say, oh, I like them. That looks interesting. And I think the finances, of course, they matter.
Yeah, right.
But I think now that the movie's out, they kind of don't matter, especially for the way we talk about it. Yes, they won't get to make a sequel, but I don't think that's immediate. I mean, we talk about this all the time. The box office, the financial success of a work of art is not an indication, a reliable indication, of the quality of that work of art. Well, of course not.
And even something like this isn't really going to have, like, because the other like point of success is, does it have critical success? But when it's an action comedy rom-com, like this isn't going to win an Oscar, right? It's not trying to win an Oscar. Like, that's not the point of this movie. It's not meant to be this like Oscar bait sweeping drama. Like, it's not an Oppenheimer, because it's not trying to be an Oppenheimer. So it can be successful just in people enjoying it. I mean, and that's really what a movie like this is setting out to do. It's not trying to like change the face of something or get across a really intense political message or tell a quote unquote important story. Like, it's not doing any of that. It's just there to have fun. Now, the little caveat there is that it is making a bit of a statement about stunt performers and stunt coordinators and how important they are to the movie industry and how like lauded they should be. But otherwise, it's just here to have a good time, and we did have a good time, so it's successful in that way.
And I think that's where I want to refocus things, because I don't care about the box office receipts, I don't care about the critical reception, and I don't care about the audience rating. I liked the movie, and I want to talk about 3 ways in which I think it's a success, because I'm very frustrated seeing so much of the narrative about a movie that I think has a lot of heart in it. I hate that the entire narrative is about it being a failure. So I want to talk about 3 ways that I really think it's a success.
I love that, because everywhere I'm seeing is like, oh, this movie is flopping. Like, no one's going to see The Fall Guy. It's a terrible flop. I'm like, it was a great movie. Shut up. And by you saying that, people saying that it's flopping, it makes you not want to go see it. Yeah. Even I was
word of mouth.
Like, we were gonna see it. We had seen trailers. We were excited. We like had already got tickets, but we had also seen that it wasn't doing well. And so I kind of had a moment of like, oh no, is this movie going to be bad? And I hate that influenced how I was feeling when I went into the movie. Like and luckily I was pleasantly surprised and it was fantastic, but I was a little nervous going in.
Yeah, these things are regrettable facts of life, but I think as much as we can dispel and ignore them, we should. So this is not a complaining episode. I just wanted to set the table and now talk about 3 things I really loved that this work of art did.
Awesome.
And reasons I can absolutely consider it a success. So the first one is about directing. And that's why I really wanted to set the table there for how we talked about David Leitch. I really admire him. I think we've inadvertently followed his career pretty closely. He's made other movies that I didn't reference earlier because I haven't seen them. He did that Hobbs and Shaw spin-off of Fast and the Furious.
Oh,
the Rock and Jason Statham.
Yeah.
Actually, I think I might have No, I don't know. They all run together.
They sure do.
We've seen Atomic Blonde, Deadpool 2, and Bullet Train. You previewed Atomic Blonde earlier. I love the style and energy of that movie. It was so much fun.
It's a solid movie.
Deadpool 2, I liked Josh Brolin. The rest of it didn't do much for me.
I actually didn't see Deadpool 2 because you told me it wasn't good, so I didn't see it.
I don't like what they do with their central relationship, and I think it sort of betrays the conceit of the first one. Bullet Train, which was also weirdly divisive when it came out a couple years ago. It's like this on a train with Brad Pitt.
Right.
You know?
And it was all right. There were moments I really enjoyed. I think the hardest part for both of us was the writing. The script wasn't very good.
The humor fell really flat. There were a couple very interesting characters, but through the whole runtime, it just didn't come together. If I could take the set pieces a la carte, I would take about half of it.
I was going to say, a lot of the stunt work, awesome.
Sure.
That stuff was great.
And the style and the color, it just, something about it didn't gel.
Right.
Which is frustrating.
It is frustrating. Like, Atomic Blonde is certainly the strongest of those three.
The near miss is more frustrating than the total miss, if that makes sense. So, going into The Fall Guy, that's sort of what I was hesitant about. And I found this to be much more cohesive than any of those three movies.
Yeah.
In terms of tone, plot, and just character direction.
Characters were great. Really good characters. Like, in Atomic Blonde, I feel like the one good character is Charlize Theron's character. And everybody else is kind of tertiary.
James McAvoy was pretty good. He was the bad guy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was all right. Yeah. I didn't remember him. You know, what does that say?
In terms of set pieces, I think this felt like, you know how when someone in Hollywood gets enough cred where they can make the movie they really want to make, and they really cut loose, and it's either by far their most beloved or by far their most hated.
Are you thinking about Ari Aster?
Absolutely. And I think when they do get to cut loose and like make one for them, when it's a passion project,
you can tell they're loving it.
I think those are some of the most interesting and revealing works of art when you're following someone's career.
Yeah.
Which is why, go check out the episode we did on Beau is Afraid, because I think that's by far the best Ari Aster movie. That was such a big swing, but there's such heart and passion in that movie. You can tell he's so excited to do that. It's got that kid in a candy store feeling. Watching The Fall Guy, thinking about those other, action comedies, these set pieces felt so liberated. They felt so kitchen sink and fun. For example, having the big chase, run, hide, shootout in the hotel, but having Ryan Gosling goofy and hallucinating and just putting unicorns through every room that he runs through.
Yeah, excellent. I loved that.
The repetition with the unicorns was so fun.
It was. And that could have been really cringy because that sound like you describing it right now sounds like the most millennial cringe thing I've ever heard of. And it really wasn't. Like, it was very funny. I think I said this as we left the theater. This movie was really good, but I think it so depended on the performances of Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt. Like, if you hadn't had such knockout, hilariously good actors, then it would have been, I think it would have been tough, Their
charisma carried some of the weaker moments.
Yeah, and like they are like the perfect fit for the style that David Leitch is going for. So it all worked really well. It was great.
There are traditional set pieces, but the riffs on them speak to a cast and crew having a lot of fun. That's what I meant with the unicorns. There's a car chase that has a really interesting sort of monkey wrench thrown in there. And
there's like a truck thing, and then the dog who only speaks French. Like, it was all just very silly. Like, you could tell that he was having a lot of fun, like you were saying, especially when it's leaning into some of the meta stuff. Right, because it's a movie about making a movie, so sometimes they're being funny and saying we're having a hard time with the third act, and like
a very light touch.
What if we do split screen and then they're on the phone in split screen talking about? So like there are some moments like that, but it's not too much.
And going back to John Wick, I think there are moments when you nod to classical structure within John Wick. But if you look at that split camera or whatever it's called, split screen sort of moment here. Seeing both characters have this conversation, they're both so incredibly choreographed, where all of the movements and settings and actions they have are perfectly timed and complementary.
Right.
So even in a moment that is sort of a goofy throwaway script-wise, it's incredibly intricate on a technical level.
Yes.
And I think that's what I mean here. It's not just people having a good time. It's people being happy and really, really inspired.
Yeah,
There's a level of craft throughout this movie where it's not just we have strong, funny guest stars and characters. It's not just a big explosive finale. It's the balance of everything.
Yes. Yeah. About balance, like one thing I really enjoyed was there's this balance between like heightened stylization and also like a grounded reality, because again, it's a movie about making a movie. So you see Ryan Gosling's character, who is this stunt guy who's used to doing crazy stunts, but like isn't used to actually doing real life, shootout shit. You see him like not wanting to jump off the roof and like saying like having moments of like almost Marvel level like irony of like, oh, this is ridiculous, or this would never make any sense in real life. But then still him doing the crazy stunts on the truck, like, and that being part of the actual story, like it's like very self-aware and kind of making fun of itself and recognizing how absurd this set piece is, but you're having so much fun that it's okay. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a nice push-pull there, and I really liked that.
Not every second is going for action. Not every second is going for a joke. I noticed a really interesting balance of silly scenes, action scenes, and silly action scenes.
Yeah.
But if you don't have all three of those legs of the stool, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I really admired that. The second thing I wanted to play with here is celebrating The Fall Guy as a consistently fun action comedy, but also it's a romantic action comedy.
Yes. When we last had one of those, that was good.
We've done multiple soliloquies on this topic. Over on Patreon, we talked about Operation Fortune, which was a Guy Ritchie movie from a couple years ago that no one liked, and we really did. Tristan and I talked about Van Helsing probably a year ago now, and that was from the writer-director of The Mummy. And you and I got to see The Mummy in theaters for its 25th anniversary. It was re-released last week. And The Fall Guy is not The Mummy. The Mummy is sort of perfect. The Mummy is the archetype.
You can never be The Mummy. Yeah.
But The Fall Guy still feels like a win because it is a step in that direction.
Absolutely.
Doesn't have to be a timeless classic, but we don't even get anyone swinging for romantic action comedies.
We really don't.
Speaking of Operation Fortune, it's nice to see someone besides Guy Ritchie trying to make one of these things.
Right.
Because I really like Guy Ritchie, but I feel bad for him because it looks like he's the only one trying to make one of these.
Well, exactly. It really has felt like it's only him for a long time.
And like a couple weeks ago, we saw The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, which is his most recent movie.
Yeah.
Another one that underperformed, so everyone just wrote it off as a flop and a failure.
Right.
I thought that movie was a romp.
I really enjoyed that movie. It was so fun. Henry Cavill was having the time of his life.
I haven't seen many movies in the last few years where people have been having more fun clearly on screen.
Yeah.
I think that cast loved each other.
I really got that sense. And that's always so nice and endearing when you watch that.
Yeah. And it's not supposed to be the best war movie you've ever seen. It's not supposed to be Inglourious Bastards. It's interesting. And it's incredibly fun.
Yeah.
Legally, every ticket to that movie should have come with a bucket of popcorn.
Yeah, that's a popcorn movie.
It's just great entertainment. But I found myself much more invested in The Fall Guy. And I think that's that last little element of not just being an action comedy, but being a romantic action comedy.
Yes, because it adds like emotional stakes in a way that without the romance, they may not be there.
You have two extraordinarily charismatic leads in Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling.
And they've got great chemistry too. That adds
Giving
a lot.
them the chemistry, the history. My favorite scene in the movie is the classic little montage back through vignettes of their history and their relationship together, set to All Too Well with him crying in the car.
It's perfect.
And then her finding him doing that and making fun of him.
It's absolutely perfect.
But it's really good.
It does a lot.
Like they both sell it perfectly. I think I found myself sort of, I don't know, I was waxing poetic as the credits were rolling on the movie. We want to fall in love with characters. We want to like every movie we go to see. And I don't mean you and me.
Yeah, the collective we.
We also have that posture. But I think everyone. You know, if you've paid money, if you've taken time out of your day, you go in wanting to love it. Or at least you should.
Yeah, right.
And that
I want to
happened
hate
here.
this movie. Yeah.
I loved these characters.
Me too.
I loved this feel. And it was fun and twisty. And I don't care if I knew where it was going. Ryan Gosling's always funny and magnetic, but I think he's at his best when his heart is on the line.
Yeah.
Whether it's in drama in Blue Valentine or it's a comedy in Crazy Stupid Love. I think I think that's where he's at his best.
I agree.
And this movie tapped into that.
It really did. It was such a delight to watch. And especially when it's meant to be like this love letter to stunts and stunt
that's
performers.
the third one.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah.
That's that's a great transition. The third way that I want to talk about this movie as being a success is that it is about something. It is pointedly, I mean, if they stared into the camera and said, "My name is Ryan Gosling, this is what the movie's about," it wouldn't be more explicit than it is in its current form.
Right.
This movie is a celebration and recognition of stuntmen. But even broader, like you talked about, it's a movie about movie making, and one of the characters is a stuntman, the other lead character is a director. What the movie seems to be about is artistic craft.
Absolutely, especially because the villain is the executive producer. Do you know, like, and like, there's all this stuff about the studio is going to shut them down, and the studio executives are like doing these things that are nasty and horrible, and don't at all care about the artistic integrity of the movie. But the characters you care about are the real artists. It's the director and / writer, because she's writing and directing, and it's the stunt performer.
And all of that love bleeds through. This is a passion project about passion,
right?
And I think that's why I am so irked. I'm trying not to use incredibly angry language, but I fucking hate the purely financial framing of this movie.
Me too.
I really enjoyed the film. I was locked in. I had fun. And for me, and for all of you listening, because none of us work at whatever studio financed this thing, that makes it a success.
I agree. I
don't care about the box office.
And I liked that the movie that they were making in this movie was like, it was basically like a mix between Mad Max and Dune. Like, that was
the movie within the movie.
Yes, it was like a fun like sci-fi action thing, and I really admired that because Emily Blunt, especially her character, cared so much about the movie, not about the financial success of the movie, and not about what audiences are going to like. She really cared about the artistic integrity of this movie.
Metal Storm.
Metal Storm that looked pretty goofy. And I think we often look at genre film, especially when it's like super goofy, as being just like a cash grab, as like, oh, this is like dumb and fun, it's entertaining, and it's popcorn, fodder, and that's going to be great and make us a lot of money. And usually you only think of the real like artistes and auteurs as being people who are directing Oscar movies, right? Like Oscar bait stuff. And I liked that they had her really truly care about the characters and the story and the like gravitas of the story in this genre film. And that's what this movie is, also a genre film. Because, and so it's also having that heart. Like, do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, fun and silly stories still take an incredible amount of craft, passion, discipline, technique.
Yeah, it's not just like you putting a bunch of like, who cares, just throw a car chase in there. Like, it takes a lot of work and craft.
Calling something fun popcorn entertainment doesn't mean it was easy to make.
Yeah, it doesn't mean there's no artistry behind it.
And there's not some inherent highbrow respectability to, I don't know, the latest music biopic that's Oscar bait.
Yeah,
Those things aren't inherently more worthwhile or difficult to create.
Right.
And I liked that even footing that this took towards lighter fare.
I really did too. Yeah. This is a delightful movie. Go see it. And it's like the perfect in-theater movie too.
Make up your own mind.
Yeah.
Also, I guarantee you'll have fun.
Yeah, right. Especially more fun in a theater than you will just like waiting till it's on streaming.
Ryan Gosling has quietly, and I say quietly, for the last 15 years very loudly, become probably the best physical comedian of our A-list male stars.
He is so funny.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Because there are people, I mean, there are plenty of people who can deliver lines really well, but he seems so passionately dedicated to the like Kramer entrance physicality. Like anytime he can do that, he will.
Yeah. If y'all want to see a very, very funny Ryan Gosling movie besides this one, The Nice Guys is so good. That movie's about what, 10 years old now? It's him and Russell Crowe. It's like a 1970s buddy cop action thing.
It's so good.
It is. I think that's his funniest role, is The Nice Guys. He is so funny in that role.
Yeah.
So check that out as well. Just a little bonus one for you. But yeah, The Fall Guy, awesome. And Cam, I have a question. Do you think they're finally going to create an Oscar category for stunt performers? Because he and Emily Blunt did a little thing about it at the Oscars, like as promo for The Fall Guy. And then like they mentioned the lack of the Oscar category in this movie as well. Do you think they're finally going to do it?
I hope so, but that's really not the calculus that they make decisions by in Hollywood.
That's true. And I have no idea how complicated all that stuff is. I have no idea
Sounds
about the
pretty
Academy
easy
of
to
Motion
me.
Picture. I mean, just add it. What's the harm? It's easy peasy. Yeah, anyway. They should, though, because true artistry. And it's crazy that every other element of filmmaking has an Oscar category, basically, and this one doesn't.
So I had a great time with this. So this is sort of a, light movie discussion, but also one of our more conceptual little chats. We also, every Friday, we talk about Game of Thrones. We've done chapter-by-chapter coverage since December, working through the first book. But, of course, we're very excited for House of the Dragon to come back in just a few weeks now. So we're doing a little something special to celebrate on Patreon every Sunday. Really putting out the bonus content lately. Every week until the premiere, we are doing a chapter of Fire and Blood, which is the George R. R. Martin book that's being adapted or dramatized into House of the Dragon. We're going through all of those chapters and having our normal literary analysis, big deep dive discussions. We're doing those over there in addition to Game of Thrones chapters on Friday. So that's over there on Patreon, $2 a month. You can support the show and get a whole avalanche of back catalog bonus episodes over there. Thank you very much for joining us and listening. We ride for Ryan Gosling, and we'll be back here with who knows what, another curveball episode on Tuesday.
All right. See you
very much. Bye.
Bye.